What if I told you that one single deed, one moment of sincerity, one act you thought was small, could be the very reason Allah forgives you, blesses you, and grants you Jannah? What if I told you that the little kindness you did when no one was watching could change your destiny forever? My dear brothers and sisters, in a world obsessed with numbers, status, and recognition, it's easy to think that only the big things matter, big achievements, big donations, big efforts. But in the eyes of Allah, sometimes it's the smallest, quietest, most hidden acts of goodness that carry the heaviest weight on the scales. You see, we live in a time where people chase applause, but Allah looks for sincerity. We live in a time where we glorify what's visible, but Allah sees the deeds no one else sees. And often the acts we consider too small to matter are the very deeds that could tip the scales on the day of judgment in our favor. Life teaches us that not everything is as it seems. The people we think are great may not be so in the sight of Allah, and the ones we overlook may be beloved to Him because of one secret deed only He knows about. The Prophet told us stories of people who earned Allah's mercy through acts so simple, so ordinary, that others might have dismissed them. A sinful man quenched the thirst of a dying dog, and Allah forgave him. A woman whose sins were many gave water to a thirsty animal, and Allah promised her paradise. A man removed a thorny branch from the path so others wouldn't get hurt, and that became his ticket to forgiveness. These stories remind us that our journey to Jannah isn't only built on huge, dramatic sacrifices. Sometimes it's built on small bricks of kindness, compassion, and sincerity that we lay down day after day. We live in a world where we scroll past endless problems, tragedies, and needs, thinking, what difference can I make? But the truth is, one kind word can heal a heart. One small donation can save a life. One sincere doer for someone can change their destiny, and yours too. Every good deed, no matter how small, plants a seed in your book of deeds, and you never know which seed will grow into the tree that shades you on the day of judgment. The real beauty, Allah multiplies what you do for His sake. One act can count as 10, 70, or even more in His mercy. And when done sincerely, it echoes in ways you cannot imagine. That's why the believer never underestimates any good deed, no matter how small. Because the day will come when we stand before Allah, and it might not be the big speeches, the famous donations, or the public prayers that save us. It might be the quiet tear you shed in sujood when no one saw you. It might be the meal you shared with a hungry stranger. It might be the smile you gave someone who was drowning in sadness. You never know which act will be the one Allah accepts and says because of this, paradise. We live in a world obsessed with size, numbers, and appearances, a world where success is often measured by how big something looks on the outside, how many people applaud it, how many views it gets, how many likes it collects. But Allah, the Lord of the heavens and the earth, the one who sees into the deepest corners of our hearts, doesn't judge by size, by noise, or by recognition. He judges by sincerity, by the purity of intention, by what is hidden when no one is watching. And that's why in His eyes, a single act, small and unseen by the world, when done purely for His sake, can outweigh mountains of deeds done for show, can carry more weight on the day of judgment than a lifetime of public acts done for the sake of people's approval rather than His pleasure. Think about it. The Prophet told us about a man who quenched the thirst of a dying dog. Not a human, not a famous person, not a great scholar, just a stray, thirsty animal on the verge of death. And for that one act, done sincerely with no audience, no camera, no expectation of reward from anyone except Allah, Allah forgave him his sins and granted him paradise. What does that teach us? It teaches us that in Allah's eyes, it's never about how big the act looks to the world. It's about the sincerity that burns quietly in your heart when you do it. Because sincerity turns a simple act into a monumental one, a small effort into a heavy deed on the scales, a single moment into an eternity of reward. And this is why the believer never underestimates any act of goodness, no matter how small, no matter how ordinary, no matter how unseen. Because we know that sometimes the smallest deed done with the purest heart carries more weight than the largest deed done for the wrong reasons. How many times have we passed by opportunities to do small acts of kindness? A smile to someone who's struggling, a helping hand to someone who's carrying a heavy load, a coin to someone hungry on the street, a word of encouragement to someone losing hope, and we think, it's nothing. It doesn't matter. But what if in Allah's eyes that moment mattered more than anything else you did that day? What if that smile healed someone's heart in ways you can't imagine? What if that kind word stopped someone from giving up on life, on faith, on hope? What if that little act became the reason Allah's mercy descended upon you on the day you stand before Him? You see, sincerity is what transforms the ordinary into extraordinary, the small into significant, the unnoticed into unforgettable in the sight of Allah. And sincerity means you're doing it not because you want people to see, not because you want praise, not because you want your name mentioned, but because you want Allah to see, because you want His pleasure, His love, His mercy. The Prophet warned us about people who do good deeds just to be seen, just to be praised, just to be admired. On the day of judgment, they'll be told, you got what you wanted in the world. People praised you, they clapped for you, they admired you. But today, there is no reward for you here. And that's why the righteous used to hide their good deeds the way we hide our sins. They would pray at night when no one saw them, give charity in secret so that even their left hand didn't know what the right hand gave, fast without anyone noticing, because they wanted Allah alone to know. They understood that sincerity is the soul of every act of worship, and without it, even the biggest deeds are empty. But with it, even the smallest deeds become heavy on the scales. And here's the thing about sincerity, no one can see it except Allah. People can see what you do, they can hear what you say, but they can't see the intention burning in your heart. Only Allah can. That's why a small dua whispered in the darkness of the night with a heart trembling before Allah can be worth more than hours of eloquent public prayers done to impress people. That's why a quiet tear shed in sujood when no one sees you can be heavier on the scales than a lifetime of worship done for fame. Because Allah doesn't look at the outward the way people do. He looks at the inward, at your heart, at the sincerity behind the act. And sincerity also protects you from pride, from arrogance, from the disease of doing good just to be known as a doer of good. When you do something sincerely for Allah, you don't care if people praise you or not. You don't care if they notice or not, because you weren't doing it for them anyway. You weren't looking for their applause. You were looking for Allah's pleasure. That's why the righteous used to say, a one deed done with sincerity is worth more than 1,000 done without it. And think about the mercy of Allah. He knows how small our deeds really are compared to His greatness, yet in His mercy, He magnifies them when they're done sincerely. One prayer, one sadaqah, one kind word, one moment of patience. He can multiply it 10-fold, 70-fold, even more, simply because it came from a heart that sought nothing but Him. That's why the Prophet told us not to belittle any good deed, even if it's as small as meeting your brother with a cheerful face, even if it's as simple as removing something harmful from the road, even if it's as ordinary as giving half a date in charity, because you never know which deed Allah will accept, which moment of sincerity will be the one that tips the scales in your favor on the day when nothing will matter except His mercy. And sincerity isn't only for acts of worship, it's for everything you do. When you work to feed your family, and you do it with the intention of fulfilling your responsibility as Allah commanded, it becomes worship. When you smile at your parents, help your neighbor, speak kindly to your spouse, teach a child, give advice, share knowledge, if you do it sincerely for Allah's sake, it becomes worship. That's the beauty of our faith. With sincerity, the line between the sacred and the ordinary disappears, because everything done for Allah becomes sacred. And that's why the believers constantly renew their intentions, constantly check their hearts, constantly ask Allah to purify their motives, because we know that without sincerity, deeds become empty shells. But with sincerity, even the smallest act can echo into eternity. So the next time you think it's just a small act, it doesn't matter. Remember this: in the sight of the one who sees every tear, hears every whisper, knows every intention, nothing done sincerely for his sake is ever small. Not a smile, not a coin, not a prayer, not a word, not a single step you take seeking his pleasure. On the day of judgment, when we stand before Allah with mountains of sins and so few deeds, it might be that one moment of sincerity, one small act you did when no one saw you but Allah, that becomes the reason He says, "Because of this, my servant, I have forgiven you." That is the power of sincerity. It can turn the smallest deed into your greatest salvation. When we talk about never underestimating a single good deed, the most powerful proof we have comes directly from the teachings of the Prophet, because he told us stories that shake the heart, stories that take the ordinary moments of life and show us how, in the eyes of Allah, they become extraordinary. He told us about a man who lived a sinful life, someone who wasn't known for great piety, someone who had no long record of worship, someone the world would look at and dismiss as unworthy. But one day he walked past a well and saw a dog dying of thirst, panting, tongue out, desperate for water. And his heart softened. He felt compassion. He climbed down into the well, filled his shoe with water, and gave it to the dog to drink. Just a moment, just a dog, just some water. No one saw him. No one praised him. No one recorded it on camera. No one gave him a medal for kindness. It was just a man, a dog, and Allah. And the Prophet told us that because of that single act, Allah forgave him all his sins and granted him paradise. Subhanallah, can you imagine? A man who probably thought he had nothing to offer Allah except regret and shame, and one sincere moment of kindness erased a lifetime of sin. What does that tell us about the mercy of Allah? What does that tell us about the power of one deed done sincerely? And it wasn't just this story. The Prophet also told us about a woman who had lived a life of sin, a life far from obedience, a life most people would look at and think, she's hopeless. But she too gave water to a thirsty animal. Not a human, not a scholar, not a leader, just a thirsty animal in need. And that single act became her path to forgiveness. It's as though Allah is telling us through these stories, do not underestimate anything you do for my sake, no matter how small, no matter how hidden. And then there's the story of the man who removed a thorny branch from the path so people wouldn't get hurt. A simple thing. It didn't cost him money. It didn't take hours. No one even noticed him do it. But Allah noticed. Allah recorded it. Allah loved it so much that He forgave the man's sins because of it. One thorny branch, that's all it took. And these stories keep coming again and again in the Prophet's teachings. The story of the man who gave half a date in charity, thinking it was nothing. But the Prophet said that even half a date, given sincerely, can save you from the fire. The story of the woman who imprisoned a cat, neither feeding it nor letting it go to find food. And because of that cruelty, she was punished severely in the hereafter. See how even the treatment of an animal, something we might think is small, carries weight with Allah. Because mercy, kindness, compassion, they're not small things. In the sight of Allah, they are massive. And then there's the story the Prophet told us about a prostitute from the time of Bani Israel, a woman whose entire life was filled with sin. But she gave water to a thirsty dog, and Allah forgave her because of it. This story shocks us every time we hear it, because it tells us two things. One, that no one is beyond the mercy of Allah, and two, that no deed is too small to be the reason for His mercy to descend upon you. And what's amazing is that all these stories involve acts that are easy for anyone to do. Giving water, removing harm from the road, giving charity, even if it's tiny, showing kindness to animals, saying a good word, smiling at someone. These aren't deeds that require wealth, power, or status. You don't need to be a scholar. You don't need to be famous. You don't need to be rich. All you need is sincerity, a heart that does it for Allah and not for applause. And through these stories, the Prophet was teaching us something profound. Allah is not looking at the size of the act. He's looking at the size of the sincerity behind it. The man removing the thorny branch probably didn't even think about it twice. He just did it because it felt like the right thing to do, because he wanted to help others, because he wanted Allah's pleasure. He didn't post about it. He didn't announce it. He didn't wait for thanks. And maybe that's why it was so beloved to Allah, because it was done purely for Him. You see, our problem is that we often chase big, dramatic gestures of faith while neglecting the small, consistent deeds that carry so much weight in Islam. We dream of building masjids while ignoring the neighbor who needs help carrying groceries. We want to donate huge amounts while walking past the person who just needs a smile or a kind word. But the Prophet's stories flip this thinking upside down. They tell us that the road to Jannah is paved with small, sincere acts done consistently, done quietly, done purely for Allah's sake. And here's something else. These stories also tell us that you never know which deed Allah will accept. The man who gave water to the dog probably didn't think, "This will be my ticket to Jannah." He probably didn't even remember it later. But Allah remembered. The woman who gave water to the thirsty animal probably thought it was nothing. But Allah turned that to nothing into everything for her. And the man with the thorny branch probably just wanted to make the road safer, but Allah made it the reason for His forgiveness. That's why the righteous used to say, "Do not underestimate any good deed, for you do not know which deed will save you on the day of judgment." Maybe it's the secret charity no one knew about. Maybe it's the dua you made for someone else in private. Maybe it's the smile you gave to someone who was drowning in sadness. Maybe it's the time you forgave someone when you could have taken revenge. Maybe it's the moment you held your tongue when you wanted to backbite but stopped for Allah's sake. You never know. The Prophet's stories teach us that the small deeds we ignore might be the very ones Allah magnifies, the very ones He uses to shower His mercy upon us. So don't wait for the big moments. Don't wait to become rich, famous, or perfect before doing good. Start with the small things. The smile, the kind word, the helping hand, the dua, the hidden charity, the sincere prayer at night when no one sees. Because on the day of judgment, when our deeds are placed on the scales, we might find that it wasn't the big public moments that saved us. It was the small, secret acts of kindness and sincerity that we thought were insignificant, but were massive in the eyes of Allah. One of the most breathtaking realities of our faith, something that should fill every believer's heart with hope, excitement, and motivation, is the way Allah multiplies good deeds beyond what our minds can even comprehend. We live in a world where if you give one coin, you lose one coin. If you spend a moment, it's gone forever. If you give away food, you have less for yourself. That's how the world measures things, by loss and gain, by numbers and limits. But Allah is not like this creation. He is Al-Karim, the most generous, Al-Wasi, the all-encompassing, Al-Ghani, the free of need. When you do a single good deed for His sake, He doesn't just record it as one deed. He multiplies it, expands it, elevates it, until the return is something you can't even imagine. The Prophet told us that when a person intends to do a good deed but doesn't actually do it, Allah records it as one full good deed because the intention itself mattered to Him. And when the person actually goes ahead and does it, Allah records it as 10 good deeds, and that's the minimum. Because the Prophet also told us that Allah multiplies deeds from 10 times to 700 times to even more than that, depending on the sincerity, the sacrifice, and the circumstances behind it. Think about that for a moment. You do something so small, so ordinary, like giving charity, and Allah multiplies it 700 times or even more. It's like planting a single seed in the ground and watching it grow into a forest that feeds generations. And it doesn't stop there, because Allah tells us in the Quran that applies for whomever He wills without limit. Without limit. That limit. That means there is no ceiling, no maximum, no restriction on how much He can reward you for even the smallest deed. Maybe you prayed 2 rak'ahs at night when no one saw you. Maybe you gave someone a smile when they were sad. Maybe you forgave someone who hurt you. Maybe you helped an animal find food. Maybe you gave half a date in charity. And Allah, in His infinite mercy, takes that deed, multiplies it beyond your wildest imagination, and stores it for you in your record, so that on the day of judgment, when you stand trembling before Him, you will find mountains of good deeds for things you barely even remember doing. This is why the scholars used to say, do not belittle any good deed, because the one you are dealing with is Al-Karim, the most generous. You see, in this world, people measure generosity by how much they give, but Allah's generosity is beyond human measurement. He is the one who gives to the grateful and the ungrateful, the believer and the disbeliever, the obedient and the sinner. Rain falls on everyone. Air is free for everyone. Health and provisions are given to everyone. So imagine the generosity He reserves for those who actually obey Him, love Him, trust Him, and strive for His pleasure. When you give charity sincerely for His sake, Allah says in the Quran, it's like planting a seed that grows 7 years, and in every year are 100 grains, and Allah multiplies for whom He wills. One seed becomes 700 grains, and that's just the starting point. And we know the starting point is 10 times the deed because the Prophet told us so. So if you say one tasbih, subhanallah, Allah records it at least 10 times. If you give $1 in charity, Allah records it as at least $10, and then He multiplies according to His will until it could become mountains of reward. The problem is, we measure Allah's generosity with our limited human minds. We think of, I only prayed 2 rakahs. But Allah might make those 2 rakahs the reason you enter Jannah. We think, I only gave a little bit of charity. It's so small. But Allah might multiply it until it outweighs the sins of a lifetime. We think, I only smiled at someone or said a kind word. But Allah might take that kindness, multiply it infinitely, and bring His mercy upon you because of it. And here's the most beautiful part. Allah knows the struggle behind every deed. Maybe for someone, praying 2 rakahs at night is easy, so they get the standard reward. But for someone else, getting up was hard. Maybe they were tired, sick, or emotionally broken. But they pushed themselves just for Allah. So Allah multiplies it even more because He knows the sacrifice behind it. Maybe for someone, giving $10 in charity is nothing because they are rich. But for someone else, $10 is all they have, and they still give it for Allah's sake. So Allah multiplies it in ways that will leave that person speechless on the day of judgment. The Prophet told us that the most beloved deeds to Allah are the small, consistent deeds, even if they are tiny, because they show sincerity and consistency. And Allah takes those small, consistent deeds done with love for Him and multiplies them until they become enormous on the scales. That's why the companions of the Prophet were so eager to do every small good deed. Giving water, smiling, helping others, making dua, because they knew they were dealing with a Lord whose generosity has no limit. And we too need to understand this. We are not worshipping a Lord who is waiting to catch us doing wrong. We are worshipping a Lord who is looking for every excuse to forgive us, reward us, and grant us paradise. And every small good deed you do, Allah doesn't just reward you for it once. He rewards you while you are doing it. He rewards you after you do it. And sometimes He rewards you in ways you don't even see, with peace in your heart, with barakah in your life, with doors opening when you least expect it. Because the multiplication of good deeds isn't just about the hereafter. Sometimes it shows up in your dunya too. You help someone today, and Allah helps you tomorrow. You give charity today, and Allah removes calamity from your life tomorrow. You smile at someone today, and Allah sends someone to comfort you when you're broken. The Prophet told us that charity never decreases wealth. In fact, it increases it. Because when you give, Allah gives you back in ways money can't buy. Contentment, blessings, opportunities, and most importantly, forgiveness and Jannah. So when you do a good deed, never think of it as small, because Allah's multiplication turns drops into oceans, seeds into forests, sparks into blazing lights on the day of judgment. And when you stand before Him and see mountains of good deeds for things you barely remember doing, the du'as, the smiles, the words of comfort, the secret charities, you will realize that you were dealing with a Lord whose generosity knew no limits. A Lord who multiplied every act far beyond what you ever imagined. A Lord who wanted to give you Jannah even when you were unsure of yourself. This is why one good deed can change your entire destiny. Because Allah, in His mercy, can take that one deed, multiply it endlessly, and make it your path to eternal happiness. Picture this: the day of judgment has arrived. The sky has been torn apart, the earth has been flattened, the mountains have been turned to dust, and every soul stands alone before its Creator, trembling, waiting, uncertain about its fate. The books of deeds are brought forth, the records of every action we ever did, every word we spoke, every step we took, every glance, every intention, every moment of our lives, all laid bare before us. Nothing is hidden, nothing is lost. Every tiny thing you thought no one saw, Allah saw. Every small act of kindness you thought was forgotten, Allah remembered. And on that terrifying day when the scale is placed, when your entire eternity depends on which side is heavier, the side of good or the side of sin, it is often the small deeds, the ones we dismissed, that tip the scales. The Prophet told us about a man who will come on the day of judgment with 99 scrolls of sins, each scroll, as far as the eye can see, packed with mistakes, disobedience, things he thought he got away with in the dunya. And in front of all that, one tiny card will be placed, a card with the words La ilaha illallah written on it, sincerely from his heart. And in the balance, that one card will outweigh all the scrolls of sins. Subhanallah, do you see the power of sincerity? The power of a single deed done purely for Allah's sake. On that day, people will come with mountains of good deeds, but because they wronged others, backbiting, slandering, cheating, their good deeds will be taken away and given to those they harmed until they have nothing left. And others will come with almost nothing, but a single sincere deed will save them. The Prophet told us about a man who gave water to a thirsty dog, and Allah forgave him. About someone who removed harm from the road, and Allah granted him paradise. About a woman who imprisoned a cat, not feeding it nor letting it go, and she was punished severely because of it. All these stories the same thing. On the day of judgment, it's not the size of the deed that matters, it's the sincerity, the intention, and the mercy of Allah that transforms something small into something massive. Imagine the scene. The scale is empty on one side, and the angels begin placing deeds on it. Your prayers, your fasts, your charity, your kind words, your secret du'as, your hidden acts of forgiveness, the times you smiled when you were hurting inside but didn't want to burden others. Each small deed drops onto the scale, and slowly, the side of good begins to get heavier. Maybe one day you stopped yourself from saying something cruel in anger. That goes on the scale. Maybe one night you cry to Allah in secret, asking for His help. That goes on the scale. That goes on the scale. Maybe you sent a message of encouragement to someone when they were down. That goes on the scale. Maybe you gave half a date in charity when you had almost nothing. That goes on the scale. And maybe, just maybe, one of those small deeds, the one you didn't even remember, is the deed that tips the balance in your favor. That's why the Prophet told us, do not belittle any good deed, even if it is meeting your brother with a smiling face. Because you never know which deed will come to your rescue on that day. Think about this deeply. We are so obsessed with big gestures in life. We think only the people who give millions in charity, or those who build masjids, or those who spend their whole lives in worship will be saved. And yes, those deeds carry immense weight. But the stories from the Prophet's life show us that small, sincere acts, the ones done purely for Allah, without seeking praise, without expecting anything in return, can be the heaviest on the scale. Maybe you couldn't afford to build a masjid, but you gave someone water on a hot day. Maybe you didn't memorize the whole Quran, but you recited one ayah with love and sincerity. Maybe you didn't fast every Monday and Thursday, but you stopped yourself from gossiping when everyone else was doing it. Maybe you didn't spend your life giving lectures, but you made sincere dua for someone else in secret without them even knowing. Allah sees it all. Allah records it all. Allah values it all. And on the day of judgment, when our deeds are placed on the scale, many of us will be shocked to see which deeds carry the most weight. It might not be the ones we thought were big. It might be the ones no one saw, no one praised, no one even noticed, except Allah. Because sometimes the deed itself is small, but the sincerity behind it is massive. Sometimes the act is tiny, but the love for Allah in the heart of the one doing it is enormous. And Allah does not look at the size of the act the way we do. He looks at the state of the heart that did it. That's why the scholars used to say, maybe you meet Allah with what you think is a small deed, and He meets you with a reward bigger than the mountains. And maybe you meet Him with what you think is a huge deed, but it was done for show, for reputation, for ego, and He throws it back because it was never for Him in the first place. On that day, nothing else will matter. Not your wealth, not your status, not your followers, not your fame. Only the deeds done for Allah will matter. Only the deeds done sincerely with love, with humility, with hope in His mercy will carry weight. And the smallest ones might be the very ones that save you. So the next time you have a chance to do good, even something tiny, a smile, a kind word, a secret dua, a hidden charity, do it. Don't wait. Don't dismiss it as a too small. Because on the day of judgment, when the scales are placed, when your heart is pounding in terror, when you are desperate for even a single good deed to save you, you might find that it was the smile you gave someone, or the dua you made for a stranger, or the glass of water you gave in secret that tips the scales in your favor and opens the gates of Jannah for you forever. When we talk about good deeds, most people think in terms of numbers. How many prayers? How much charity? How long the fasting? How many Quran pages recited? And while these are important, the Prophet of Allah taught us something so profound, so life-changing, that if we truly understood it, it would transform the way we approach worship, kindness, and everything we do for the sake of Allah. He taught us that what matters most to Allah is not the size or the number of the deeds, but the sincerity behind them, the purity of the heart doing them. Because you could pray all night, but do it for people to call you pious, and it would carry no weight on the day of judgment. You could give millions in charity, but do it for reputation, and it would be worth nothing in the hereafter. On the other hand, you could give a single coin, a single sip of water, single kind word, but give it purely for Allah, with a heart that seeks nothing in return except His pleasure. And that one act could outweigh mountains of empty deeds. That's why the very first hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, the most authentic book after the Quran, begins with the words, actions are judged by intentions, not by size, not by number, by intention, by sincerity. And the Prophet told us about 3 people who will be the first to be judged on the day of judgment: a martyr, a scholar, and a wealthy man who gave charity. And all 3 will be cast into the hellfire because they did what they did for reputation, for fame, for people to call them brave, knowledgeable, or generous, not for Allah. Subhanallah, can you imagine? People the world admired, people everyone thought were righteous, yet because their hearts were corrupt, because they wanted applause instead of Allah's pleasure, their deeds were rejected. This should shake us to the core. It means sincerity is everything. Without sincerity, even the biggest, most impressive deeds crumble to dust. But with sincerity, even the smallest deeds shine brighter than the stars. That's why the Prophet told us about a man who gave water to a thirsty dog, and Allah forgave him. The act itself was tiny, but the heart behind it was pure, so Allah elevated it beyond imagination. And sincerity is what turns ordinary actions into worship. Eating, sleeping, working, smiling, if done with the intention to please Allah, to gain His strength, to bring happiness to others, they become acts of worship, rewarded like prayers and charity. You see, sincerity is like the soul of a deed. A body without a soul is dead, and a deed without sincerity is empty. It might look impressive on the outside, but before Allah, it has no life. And sincerity is hidden. It lives in the heart. People can't see it. That's why it's so beloved to Allah, because only He knows it. When you do something purely for Him, not for likes, not for praise, not for recognition, not even for gratitude, just for Him, That's when it carries unimaginable weight. And sincerity is what protects you from hypocrisy. It keeps your worship alive even when no one is watching. It keeps you praying at night when the world sleeps, giving charity in secret when no one sees, helping someone quietly without posting about it, making dua for people who will never know you prayed for them. The righteous before us used to hide their good deeds the way we hide our sins. One of them would fast for years and his family thought he just ate breakfast elsewhere. Another would give charity secretly, leaving money where the poor would find it without knowing who left it. Why? Because they feared showing off, because they knew sincerity is everything. And here's the amazing part. A small deed with sincerity can outweigh a lifetime of sin if Allah accepts it, while a mountain of deeds without sincerity can be worthless. That's why the scholars used to beg Allah not just for the ability to do good deeds, but for the gift of ikhlas, sincerity. Because they knew that without it, all their worship might be empty on the day of judgment. And sincerity also changes how you see other people. You stop judging because you realize someone you think is insignificant might have a hidden deed done sincerely that makes them beloved to Allah while you're busy chasing applause. The Prophet told us about a man who removed a thorny branch from the road so people wouldn't get hurt, and Allah forgave him. Imagine a simple act anyone could do, but done purely for Allah. It became the reason for paradise. And here we are, chasing numbers while Allah is looking at hearts. Sincerity also protects you from despair. Maybe you can't give millions in charity. Maybe you can't fast every Monday and Thursday. Maybe you can't pray all night. But if the little you do is sincere, it could be worth more than all the empty deeds done for show. Because Allah looks at quality, not quantity. One tear shed in the middle of the night out of love for Him could outweigh years of routine prayers done heedlessly. One sincere astaghfirullah could erase mountains of sin if it comes from a heart broken before Him. One private dua for someone else could bring you mercy when you need it most. That's the power of sincerity. It turns whispers into thunder, crumbs into feasts, drops into oceans on the scale of deeds. And sincerity is what keeps you going when no one appreciates you, when no one sees your efforts, when people criticize or ignore you because you weren't doing it for them anyway. You were doing it for Allah, and He never ignores, never forgets, never wastes the reward of the sincere knowledge you taught still being practiced centuries later. Children or students you raised continuing the chain of good deeds you started. Even a dua you make for someone can ripple in unseen ways. Maybe Allah accepts it, and they are guided, and through them countless others are guided, all because of your secret prayer. And sometimes the ripple effect begins with something so small you barely even notice it. Maybe you shared one hadith with someone and it changed how they lived. Maybe you forgave someone who wronged you and they softened and their heart turned back to Allah. Maybe you donated $1 to print a Quran and someone in a faraway country read it, memorized it, taught it to hundreds of others, and every single letter recited until the day of judgment adds to your record because you were the one who started it. And here's the beautiful part. Allah never lets the reward of any good deed go to waste. Even if you forget, even if you never see the results, even if the people benefiting don't know your name, Allah knows. He tracks every ripple, every consequence, every chain reaction set off by your kindness, your generosity, your sincerity. So on the day of judgment, when you're desperate for good deeds, when you're trembling as your record is opened, you might find mountains of reward for things you didn't even remember doing. A dua here, a smile there, a charity years ago, and all the countless lives it touched without you realizing. And this ripple effect doesn't just apply to material things. Sometimes it's emotional or spiritual. You comfort someone in pain, they gain the strength to keep going, they raise a family with love instead of bitterness, and generations live better lives because you were kind to them when they were broken. You advise someone privately to leave a sin, they change, they guide others. And the chain of guidance continues because you had the courage to say a few sincere words. The scholars say this is why we should never belittle even the tiniest good deed, because you don't know what Allah will do with it. Go with it. One moment of kindness could become your path to paradise because of the endless ripple it created. And this ripple continues even after you die. The charity you gave, the knowledge you spread, the people you inspired, they keep working, keep spreading, keep benefiting others while you're in your grave, unable to do anything new. Yet your record keeps growing because of the seeds you planted in life. That's why the righteous were so eager to do good deeds that last. To build wells, schools, masjids, to teach Quran, to raise righteous children. Because they knew that when their time ended, the ripple would continue carrying rewards to them until the day of judgment. And think about how easy this is today. One reminder posted online can reach millions. One sincere dua can change destinies. One act of kindness can turn a heart back to Allah, and that heart might guide hundreds more. The ripple effect means you don't need wealth or fame to leave a legacy of goodness. You just need sincerity and consistency. Maybe your reminder only reaches one person, but that one person might be the one through whom Allah guides an entire community. Maybe your small charity feeds one child, but that child grows up to do great things because you gave them strength when they were hungry. And all of it keeps coming back to you as reward. This is why the Prophet taught us to never delay a good deed, never belittle a small act of kindness. Because you never know which one will start a ripple that saves you on the day of judgment. Imagine standing before Allah and seeing mountains of good deeds you don't recognize, and being told, this is from the well you helped dig. This is from the Quran you gave someone. This is from the dua you made for a stranger. This is from the advice you gave a friend. This is from the kindness you showed someone who was about to give up on life. And you realize your life was bigger than you thought, your impact deeper than you imagined, because Allah took every small deed and made it echo through time in ways you could never planned. That's the mercy of Allah. That's the generosity of Allah. He takes what little we do and turns it into oceans of reward if we do it sincerely, if we do it for Him. So never hold back from doing good, no matter how small. Plant the seed, start the ripple. Because you might leave this world, but your deeds can keep echoing into eternity, filling your scales with mountains of reward long after you're gone. One of the most beautiful and hope-giving truths in Islam is that your good deeds have the power to wash away your sins, to cleanse your heart, to lighten the burden that weighs you down when you feel like you've made too many mistakes to ever be forgiven. Because Allah, in His infinite mercy, gave us this path of redemption, this door of hope, this opportunity to start fresh every single day, no matter how broken we feel. When you look back at your life and you see the wrong choices, the sins, the regrets, the times you fell short, the moments you strayed from the path, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, to feel like you'll never be good enough, like your past defines you. But Allah tells us over and over in the Quran and through the words of the Prophet that He is Al-Ghafur, the most forgiving, Al-Rahim, the most merciful, Al-Tawwab, the one who accepts repentance over and over again. Another story tells us of a man who gave water to a thirsty dog, and Allah forgave his sins because of that compassion. Subhanallah, forgiveness wrapped in the simplest gestures, mercy hidden in the smallest opportunities. Because with every good deed, you're not just erasing the past, you're building a future filled with Allah's mercy until the day you meet Him with a heart that's been cleansed again and again by the very actions He taught you to do for your own salvation. Your fasting will come as a shield. The Prophet said, As-siyam wal Quran yashfani lil abdi. Fasting and the Quran will intercede for the servant. That's why the righteous were of secret deeds no one knew about. Prayers at night, charity in private, tears shed in sujood. Because they knew one day they'd be alone in the grave, alone on the day of judgment, alone crossing the Sirat.